So intimate justice is really a framework to help us organize a series of things that we see that might look disorganized, but a theory helps us put them together so that we can see them actually in relationship with one another. When I talk to people in research studies, one of the things that I've heard over and over again are research participants telling me that the discrimination that they face is no big deal, or that the things that they're describing to me, sometimes involving pain with the kinds of sex that they're having, that no big deal. So I've started to really track what I call no big deal discourses over the last 15 years. And I've seen it in almost a dozen studies of young queer women in Michigan telling me that when someone yells "dyke" at them on the street, it's no big deal. Or women with stage 4 breast cancer who tell me about the extreme pain that they experience when having sex with their husbands is no big deal because it's part of the contract that they have as being a good wife. Or students at the University of Michigan who, when asked why they didn't report a sexual assault, say that it was no big deal. And those are just 3 of the many, many things and times I've heard participants tell me something is no big deal. So my job as a researcher is to really think, do I take that no big deal at face value? Or do I really think about what were the conditions that produce someone to what I call disavow, meaning to not think of something as a big deal, and to think about discrimination as something that is normal and to be expected. And to me, intimate justice is a way for us to really think about when these no big deal discourses arrive, what happened such that someone started to think about the discrimination they faced as not noteworthy. What I mean by discourses are often the series of negative messages that people hear about themselves or a group that they belong to, and that often become a way that then people internalize as shaping the way that they then think about themselves. And so if people are consistently hearing that they themselves or the group that they belong to are less than or unworthy, then that becomes a way that people start to describe themselves. And then if we move to the idea of defining what's satisfying, I certainly have found across several different studies that a couple of things. One is when I ask young women whether they're satisfied and how they knew they were satisfied. One of the things that I've consistently seen is that young women will say, I knew I was satisfied because he was satisfied. And so I've been always interested in that because that's someone reporting on their own rating, their own answer to a question through referencing someone else. In this case, a male partner, and that someone defining whether they are satisfied by whether or not their male partner is satisfied is, in fact, as a researcher, if I hadn't asked the question, how did you know? I would have never known that she was basing it on his response, on that he was satisfied. And mostly it's young women reporting on the fact that their male partner had an orgasm. And so she was making some assumptions about that his orgasm was his marker of satisfaction, and his satisfaction was a stand-in, was equal to, was the reason she was satisfied. So there's this kind of chain of events. But as a researcher, often what people do is just say, were you satisfied? And in this case, this young woman would have answered on that scale, highly satisfied, which is, in fact, in this study, what she did. And it was only because I said, tell me more about that I learned about this kind of chain of events, that she was saying, oh, it was because he orgasmed and he was satisfied, and that meant I was satisfied. So there's a confusion and lots of assumptions being made that orgasm is the same as being sexually satisfied, that a confusion between her and him in this case for the researcher. So this is a good example of needing to really think about how people define their terms. There's a very smart woman in a meeting once who said, if we teach women to have orgasms, imagine the kinds of demands they'd make for clean water. So to really think about the intimate demands leading the political demands, we often think about political demands leading to more sexual demands or intimate demands that would come later. But this very smart woman reversed that and said, what happens if you make demands at the bodily, physical, personal level, and that moves outwards. And I find that a really powerful and provocative idea, because we've so reversed that and thought that political first, personal later, or that they are tied, but there's a sense of where the personal is something that people make lots of decisions for themselves about. But what if we made the demand there, the body first?